This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fergal McNamara, and I co-chair the Climate and Energy Group here at the IIEA. And you're all very welcome to this webinar on the role of sustainable hydropower in the energy transition, given to us this afternoon by Eddie Rish, who is the CEO of the International Hydropower Association. And I'll come back and introduce Eddie more fully momentarily. But Eddie will speak to us this afternoon for about 20 minutes, and then it'll be your turn to join in the conversation by please using the Q&A function on the Zoom. And please note also that the session is on the record, the session and the Q&A, and put in your questions as soon as they occur to you. Don't wait till the end of the presentation. Just put them in whenever they occur to you, and I will do my best to put them to Eddie on your behalf. And please, if you're using social media, please remember to tag us at IIEA. And so, Eddie, you're very welcome this afternoon to the Institute. Eddie, you're the CEO of the IHA, and you've been there since 2019. And it's a value-based organization that prioritizes the role of sustainable hydropower around the world and in the energy transition. I think you've launched, and you maybe tell us a little bit about it, the Hydropower Sustainability Standard in 2021. And in 2022, congratulations, your association won in the International Association of the Year. So congratulations on that. You have, before being the CEO, you were 20 years in the corporates in the extractive industry at DFID, which is the UK Department for International Development, and had a role as a representative in Angola and Kenya. So, Eddie, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the Institute, and we're really looking forward to your remarks. The floor is yours. Thank you, Eddie.
Thanks, Fergal. Yes, that sounds like me. So I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. I hope with this you can see the slide. Okay, good. You put in the notes here that I'd refer to hydropower as sort of the ignored giant, and it's also sometimes called the forgotten workhorse. Just to give that some context, in terms of generation, hydropower is still bigger than wind and solar put together. Now, I don't consider this a beauty contest. We absolutely need more wind and solar, and I'm delighted that solar is going like this, and I'm delighted that wind is going nearly as fast in expansion, and that they will overtake hydropower. But let's not forget this role that hydropower has, and I'll try to explain it all, sitting underneath wind and solar to help get the most out of those two important and essential resources as we go through the energy transition. So I've got a few slides here just to try and tell that story. I'm going to talk a little bit to introduce you to the technology. I'm expecting quite a bit of knowledge already, but just a few sort of general remarks to familiarize ourselves. And then we'll talk about the main thing, the global trends in hydropower. And then that focus on sustainability, Fergal, that you talked about, and then some key priorities and activities that we collectively need to take. So what is a hydropower plant? Obviously, it is using the power of water to convert into electricity. And that's basic principle underpinning it. It is renewable, right? There's lots to talk about whether or not things are clean or not, or sustainable or not, but renewable is a binary concept, the same drop of water getting used over and over again. It is reliable. The water is there and available to be used. It's secure in that it is predominantly domestic. If you have water and you have height, then you can produce hydropower, and almost every country has that. There is, of course, you need to build concrete. You quite often need, you will need a turbine. Quite often need to bring that in from abroad. But the basic parts of this are all domestic. Then in a slightly lighter green, I would say it's often referred to as a forever technology, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Once you've built it, it is there. And again in lighter green, because there are shades of this, it can be sustainable. And we say going forward, the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower. And by that, I mean environmentally, socially, and from a governance perspective. So you could look at all of that and go, well, why is it not being built everywhere? Why is this not, the whole picture? I should have said, and finally, it's affordable. And again, I'll show you some figures on that. Again, it's a complicated question about affordability. It's not a straightforward figure. So the problem is the market alone will not deliver this. Why is that? Well, first of all, it is expensive to build a large piece of infrastructure. You need money up front. Secondly, of course, we're talking about long time frames here. Quite often it takes 10, 15 years to get one of these built once you've gone through the licensing process and then building the infrastructure. Some of this can be streamlined. Some of this can be made more efficient and quicker. But ultimately, big infrastructure needs to go through that. And that's, a problem given the urgency of the energy transition. And then there are these bits which can be more easily dealt with, so I put more in amber color, the uncertain return, particularly with water batteries or pumped storage. If you have sources of electricity like wind and solar, you don't know how much you're going to be relying on essentially a backup, and that's difficult for investors. There are also fragmented benefits, so it's not only that you are producing energy. If that were the only issue, then it was you could reward on that. But in fact, it provides so many water services, flood and irrigation and drought control. It also provides grid services of stability, of flexibility, of balance. And these are very difficult for the market to deal with. I always say the market is very good at rewarding you for turning the light on. It's not very good at rewarding you for knowing that the light is going to come on. And that is a sort of frontier market problem. So we need government intervention. Plus, of course, there are concerns about, as with any large infrastructure, environmental and social impact. And this needs to be dealt with. And of course, there's increasing concerns about climate resilience. And I'll talk about this later. Are we coming into a period where we will see increasing amounts of drought? Look, the main elements of a hydropower plant, of course, you drop water downhill. It goes through a turbine. Turbine's connected to a generator that's connected to a transformer and out down the transmission lines. Quite often there will be, there'll always be a spillway for any water that is in addition that can't be used for electricity, and that which can be switched on and off. And there's increasingly fish ladders to make sure that we ensure good fish passage. We don't have any impact on fish migration. 3 types of power plants, very quickly, just so we're all on the same page, there's run of the river, basically just dropping a turbine into the water and connecting it with the electricity. Then there is the more well-known one where you build a dam and effectively have a reservoir behind a dam, reservoir storage hydropower. Those two, run of river and reservoir storage, are often known as conventional hydropower. The third part, third and final, is pumped storage, or water batteries, as we quite often call them. And basically, these have an upper and lower reservoir. And when you need the power, you drop the water down through the turbine in a normal way. But the beauty is when you've got too much other electricity on the system, the grid can't take it, or the prices are very, very low because demand is low, then you can use that excess to pump the water up. It is a water battery that you are recharging, ideally from wind and solar. This is the perfect complement. Water, wind, sun gets the job done. I've referred to hydropower as a forever technology. If you look at this, you've got the various parts of the turbines and so on. These tend to be around 40 years. You've got electrical equipment, 20 to 30 years. Transmission lines, these can be 70 years. But the basic structure, as long as you maintain it, it will be there forever. Now, that is a big distinction. And as I say, I'm not talking about beauty contests here. I'm just wanting to situate it. It's a big distinction from any other form of renewable energy. It's a much longer lifeline. And that's important when you start to talk about the costs. Because if you look at the life cycle, then for a long time, hydropower was by far the cheapest form of electricity over the full life cycle. In fact, even if you just say it's 30 years instead of forever, you can see from this that what's happened in the last few years is the price of solar has fallen through the floor. Great news, excellent. Wind also reduced. Hydropower hasn't changed price, right? That's because, it's my boss often says, the president of IHA often says, Moore's law does not apply to digging holes. Basically, there is no smart way that you can shorten this time. But look, we are still at the same level in terms of costs as wind and solar. In fact, we're a lot cheaper than offshore wind. Again, I'm not saying this is a beauty contest. I'm saying you're going to need all of these elements in a decarbonised, reliable, secure environment. What's changing? Okay, so look, if you have all these technologies, solar down to oil and gas and coal and nuclear, and you try and put them sort of on this axis of dispatchability and predictability, what you see is what there was up until 2000, before wind and solar really came on the system. You'd have everything up in that good corner, dispatchability and predictability. And this is, I'm not talking about net decarbonisation and net zero. You had a very flexible system. Now, what's happening with today's fleet, of course, is you've got wind and solar entering it in a big way, and they are variable renewables. What do? Wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine. You can put some batteries onto the system. And if you take out in a decarbonised system, if you take out oil, gas and coal, then you realise in terms of your flexibility, in terms of your dispatchability, being able to just turn on your system. You've really got hydro and geothermal as your options. And geothermal is tough. It's obviously much smaller than hydro. We definitely want to use it where you got it. It's a great thing, and it can be used for heat as well as electricity. But for electricity, hydro is going to be your answer, along perhaps with nuclear. But nuclear has other challenges which we won't cover in this this discussion. So hydropower's role, it's a bit of base load, bit of that, generation, but a bit of storage to back up wind and solar, and that's becoming a much larger part, and a bit of flexibility in grid stability. It plays those three roles. What's happening overall? Well, there's 1.5 terawatts of hydropower around the world. China growing enormously as we expect, and India now is the one really coming through, particularly on pumped storage. This is really important that we understand what's going on in the next 30 years as we get to 2050 and hopefully towards a net zero projection. We're going to see a tripling of demand for electricity. Most of that is going to come from wind and solar. But to enable that to be steady on the system, we will have to double hydropower. So it's not as dramatic, but that is a hell of a challenge, building in the next 25 years what we've built in the last 125 years. The good news is that there's plenty of potential out there. There are plenty of sites out there. This is just on river. So what you've got here is anything which is in dark blue is already there. That's installed capacity. Then you've got the light blue, which is what's in the pipeline. And then you've got green, which is what is the potential. Now, this is just on river. This is not pumped storage. So if you add on pumped storage, then you've got nearly 1 million potential sites around the world. There is no shortage. The key message I want to give is there is no shortage of potential. And, not all of these I'm suggesting should be built by any means. I'm trying to say, if somebody comes to you and says, ooh, there is the problem with hydropower is there aren't enough sites. There are, and some of these are very efficient, some of them less so. So what's happening right now? That conventional hydropower that I was talking about, the run of river and the reservoir, that's sort of bumping along at 20 gigawatts of new capacity each year. At the same time, pumped storage, that third one, that water battery, is really coming up fast. So in the next 5 years, that's going to overtake in terms of additional capacity each year. We'll be building more pumped storage than we will be conventional hydropower in about less than 5 years' time. So that is the new type of hydropower. And I'm not saying that the conventional isn't useful. It is, especially in a lot of very untapped regions like Africa and Asia. My organisation, International Hydropower Association, we're over 100 companies around the world. We represent 1/3 of the global capacity, and we're not just the operators and developers. We are also representing the manufacturers and suppliers, the turbines and the generators and other elements of power plants, and also the service industries, the consultants, the engineers, and so on, the designers of it all. And as you said at the beginning, Fergal, we are a values-based organisation. So what do we mean by that? We mean this rather bold statement that you don't hear from many trade associations. Going forward, the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower. And how do we test that? How do we keep our members committed to that phrase? Well, independent of us, there is a Hydropower Sustainability Standard, which has been developed by NGOs, by governments, by companies, and by financial institutions like the World Bank, all together, coming together and saying, right, we've made a lot of mistakes in this industry in the past on environmental and social side, but we have agreed what does a good project look like and what does a best project look like. And we expect every project going forward to certify against that. So, as I said, that's a multi-stakeholder alliance that is the custodian of that standard, and then it's independently assessed against each project. And that's now aligned with financial approval. If you want to get money to build this, then you've got to show that you've passed the standard. If you want to get green bonds, it's aligned. If you want to get international renewable certificates, it's aligned. And we're trying to now talk to governments, making sure it's aligned with government regulation. If you want to show that you are, if you want a license, then you should be able to show the certificate. That should be part of, by creating an international standard, that should be part of making sure that we have more streamlined systems for licensing and reduce the time needed for it, as well as de-risking the project over the long term, as well as it just being the right thing to do. Pumped storage. I said this is the growing part of the sector. This is the part which really can give the most support to wind and solar. All parts give support to wind and solar because they back it up, but this also stores it. We've been doing a lot of work on pumped storage. I won't go into all the various elements that we've been supporting, but this has been a large part of us helping the industry and helping governments to make sure that this is enabled. Because as I said before, unless you design the market, it won't deliver. So you've got to make it attractive. We've got to help governments. We've got to work with governments to make that happen. And that actually leads to the biggest activity in this area, which is the Global Alliance for Pumped Storage, or GAPS, which is a group of around 60 governments and international agencies, including Ireland, including many other European countries, including the European Commission, also including the big players like India and America and Canada and some Latin American countries, Australia and so on, all gather around the table saying, okay, we accept this technology is needed, but we know that it's quite difficult to implement, and we know that most policymakers will say, okay, I can do this, I can spend a lot of money, and I can have something on it in 15 years online. Or I can buy a chemical battery, and I think that will do the same job. They always go for the chemical battery unless you can persuade them. And the point is, I mean, I'm not against chemical batteries. It's absolutely essential part of the process, but they do a certain job which will help you if you've got a problem of not enough wind or solar for a couple of hours. If you've got the problem of nothing overnight, then you need something bigger. You need long duration energy storage, and that's 95% of that is pumped storage. If you've got a problem for a week or so with no wind and no sun, and my God, Ireland quite often gets that, then you need a long duration energy storage solution and pumped storage is the lead in that. I'll just finish off with a point on climate resilience, because there is so much talk about, but Eddie, the world is getting drier. It may not be that the case in Ireland, but it's certainly getting more volatile. Is this not going to make hydropower impossible, or at least variable? And does this stop the reliability? And look, it's a fair challenge. I think, though, what we do know is the more volatility you have, the more water infrastructure you're going to need. You're going to need more, not less. And if you can power it, why not power it? The most resilient countries are the ones with the most hydropower, both from a water point of view and from an energy point of view. So the simple answer isn't to say, let's turn away from hydropower. The answer is usually more hydropower, more resilience. So I'll finish there and just say, as I said before, water, wind, sun gets the job done. Fergal.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.